Welcome to Under the Fringe. We are your hosts, Andy Yablonsky and Julie Babin, two interior designers with almost 50 years of combined experience. And while we love design, our passion has really become helping the next generation of designers struggle less, earn more, and create more freedom in their lives. We offer a whole host of support options to help you create the structures you need to really thrive and grow. More to come on that at the end of the show. Hello.
Hello.
We made it. We're here once again under the fringe, peeking under the design business and all the things that could go bump in the night under that pillow and under the rug. But today we're actually talking about something that I think is incredibly important and super fun, really. And that is manifesting your dream client and boundaries. Weird topic, maybe not. How do they go together, Julie?
Well, what is interesting is in order to create an ideal client, you need to have boundaries. And that's something that Andy and I have been putting in the laboratory for over 20 years together and working across many different shapes and sizes and types of projects and types of clients and types levels of service. And so we've really run this one through the laboratory and our laboratory in life.
Yep.
And and we so I would say that we've really come to an extremely focused and very clear and easy to understand way of fine-tuning your business. That's why she said we're excited and it's going to be fun, because it really allows you to fine-tune the way that you offer your services from the beginning, from these boundaries that we're going to talk about. And that container, as Andy calls it, is how the ideal client can come in, which I think is so interesting, because if you don't create the container, then who is the ideal client? You might not even know.
So I think there's so many like pieces of this, right? So I think let's dive into what I think every business should have, which is, who is your ideal client, right? And I think there are a lot of ways of getting there. Some of us use vision boards. Some of us have things written down that we've journaled about. But essentially, the ideal client is the one that, I can share an experience actually recently. So as many of you know, I'm also an artist. And I was referred by a contractor and I went to meet the clients. Lovely couple, super sweet, young family, have a really decent budget. We're not afraid of the fees that I was talking about. So right away, somebody that is comfortable spending a certain amount of money for me falls into my ideal client category. But I didn't even realize this would become part of my ideal client script until we were sitting there and he said, well, I know you're also an artist. Are there any days that we can't contact you or shouldn't contact you because you are painting? And I like almost fell off the chair, because I've never had a client who was so considerate of how I spend my time, understanding that design is a part of who I am and not just everything that I do. And that is,
and one of the reasons why we want to talk about that is because Andy has specifically for herself personally spent a tremendous amount of time defining her schedule, deciding what she wants her schedule to be, deciding that Mondays are these sacred painting days and these other days of the week are her project days, and maybe even takes Friday off. But she's spent a tremendous amount of time personally, mentally, in the mindset practices that we always talk about, creating this all done internally.
yeah.
And then the reason why it's such a brilliant point is because this man or this client is a physical manifestation of that work that she's done.
Yeah.
And here he is standing in the physical. It's not like she went out and created a big billboard that said all this stuff. She did it internally in the quiet of her own personal space. And then this guy showed up out of thin air. So that's why I think it's such an important story.
You're so right. And like I said, I hadn't added it to like my ideal client list, but it is the manifestation of me deciding and saying to the universe, like, I am painting every Monday. Tuesday through Thursday are my hard hitting work days, and my partner typically has Fridays off, and we like to spend those together as frequently as possible. And so there are some allowable exceptions to the Friday rule, but for the most part, I actually do only work about 3 days a week.
Mhm.
And I spend like a ton of time in those 3 days. And I am, again, like I think we've touched on this in a couple of other podcasts, but I block out my time very intentionally. I move projects forward in ways that I understand are related to the schedule and how they're meeting milestones that are important. And so scheduling my time that way, I think, is the other way that I've really
And
created
I and
this.
I think to show them the reason why you do the time blocking and why that's such a big deal, because it's easy to just say, "Oh, I block my time."
Yeah.
Well, what's the opposite of that? We have lived through and have overcome, and now we work in this time blocking capacity, which we've talked about, I think, we can talk about it more now.
Yeah.
But the reason why that is a big deal is because the opposite of that is clients calling you on a Sunday, clients texting you on a Saturday, calling you Friday night at dinner, like all these crazy hours that
Yeah.
people will in fact try to get a hold of you. And maybe you're one of those designers out there who is feeling the need to respond in those moments that, gosh, this isn't my business hours, but I've sort of set this up with this client and here I am and I'm stuck in this. I mean, to me, it feels like a mess
Yeah.
because it's truly not your business hours, but for whatever reason, maybe you found yourself in that position. And again, that comes back to creating and setting boundaries. And this is why these are examples of why it's such a big deal to have a boundary, because that is the opposite of it. These people call you on Sundays, they call you at Friday night, somehow they know it's dinner
Yeah.
and you're sitting down and there goes the phone. And so I'm guessing that maybe some of you can relate to that. I know I've had to train people on that, and that's why we talk about working in blocks of time.
Reference another famous design podcast, Kimberly Seldon, I remember in one of her podcasts had said, she actually sets a boundary around texting, that for her,
Mhm.
texting is just reserved for family and friends, and clients are allowed to then email at whatever time of day works for them, because then it doesn't interrupt her sacred time and her quality time. And so, however you choose to do it, like, boundaries are really an incredible and incredibly important part of creating a life that you love
Mhm.
in every aspect, but we're going to focus on the business. But
Yeah.
um,
And not that one boundary is better than another, but just that we want you to be
happen.
intentional
Yeah.
about what is the boundary. Like, I mean, maybe I mean, I don't think anyone should want to be contacted over the weekend. But we don't want to judge what your boundaries are. We just want you to come to the level of honesty and integrity and intention
Yeah.
about, well, what do you want your boundaries to be? And then we're just giving you some examples.
So let's talk a little bit about the manifesting part of this. So that really, because the boundaries part will become clear in a moment, I think. Well, if not,
Mhm.
but the manifesting piece of this is like, who's your ideal client, right? And I actually don't care in this formula what your stage of design business is, or even your level and skill, because I think dreaming big
Mhm.
is really important, right? And so it's your blue sky.
Mhm.
How big can you dream? Do you want a project in Hawaii? Do you want a project in Europe? Do you want an 8,000 square foot house in San Francisco? Right? I
Do you
think,
want it to be short? Do you want it to be fast? Do you want it to be long? Do you want it to be quick? Do you want it to be a certain thing
Are
for
we
your
still talking about
portfolio.
design?
What?
I said, are we still talking about design?
Portfolio. Yeah.
Sorry.
I get it now. Portfolio. What's your portfolio? What's something you want to add to your marketing? Who are the types of people that you like working with? Are they quick decision makers? Are they people where you really have to hold their hand through the process?
Yep.
Is there a certain quality that you want those clients to have in their personality?
Is it architecture and furnishings, or is it architecture or furnishings, right?
Are
So
you really into designing kitchens and bathrooms? Are you really into window coverings? Are you really into styling and art? Like there's all these things, and we just want to encourage you to lean into what your thing is. But all of this is about being intentional.
yeah. And so I think when we really sit down with our deep desires that the universe wants to see how to play those out, right? If I and also some of this is like your ideal client, how much money do they have? How much are they willing to spend on design? How much money are they willing to spend on product? How much time do they have? Like, so I think I've touched on this a little bit, but
Mhm.
my ideal client is frequently um a family or a single person who doesn't have a lot of time. They do have a lot of disposable income. They have a very good sense of what they like. And they want some collaboration, but a minimal amount. So,
Mhm.
um, and it's not to say that I don't like still cherish the clients I have who need more collaboration. It's just that for me in the business model that I currently have, which is a flat fee, people that
Mhm.
can move through their project quickly allows me to charge appropriately and
Yeah.
so um contain and maintain the time frame that that project actually for the fee needs to move at. So the pacing is really
Right.
important there. Um,
Yeah.
and so um, so for me, because I figured out like my formula that works best for me, um,
Yeah.
those clients then come to me with, you know, this certain budget. And as far as location, like I am willing to go anywhere all around the
Yeah.
world. And that would be exciting for me. But I think some of my, like I have a friend right now that has a project in Barcelona, and I think she's going to come on to the pod and talk to us in a couple of weeks
Yep.
about having international clients, because I think this is her second one. Um,
Yeah.
and she's kind of figured out how to make that work. And so if that's a dream of
Yeah.
yours, stay tuned. But you know, what I truly want is it could be even remote and I don't even have to go very frequently, but um somebody that's clear about what they like, clear about what they have to spend and are willing to spend, um not afraid of talking about money and
Yeah.
having those conversations. Who is your, and we'll come back to the comment I just made about not afraid of talking about money, because that's actually also
Mhm.
a boundary. So
Yes.
we'll return to that because that's a pretty important one. But Julie, who is your ideal client? Because our businesses are actually very different.
Yeah, we just talked about, well, like as a point of comparison, I think Andy has created a really specialized niche of very customized
Ah, yes.
projects, which is like really thriving in the kitchen and bath. Lots of custom rugs and sofas and these beautiful draperies, and then we also tie in Andy's artwork into our projects. So that's really interesting and wonderful. And then I've over the years, gosh, I don't even know what the reason is. I think maybe perhaps one of my ideal things is speed. And so I tended to gravitate away from the longer construction projects because there was like these lengths of time that I wasn't enjoying as much. And so over the years, I ended up working a lot, what we're calling like um, mostly retail and some custom and residential, but I've also expanded that into restaurants and hospitality. which is, restaurants, hotels, and stuff like that. And so, but those are happening faster. So you need more of them because you're going through it instead of a house, because when Andy and I first met, we were working on these custom ground up houses, and those take for 3 years or so,
Yes.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I started moving into this space, a little bit more hospitality based, a little bit more, it's for some reason it's been a little bit more fun for me, maybe because I can shop online. That must be what it is.
Also, so if I were to sort of move this forward a bit, like the ideal client for you is somebody that wants things to happen on a shorter timetable. So they might want all their furnishings done in 8 weeks or 12 weeks, depending on
Something shorter. Yeah.
And I think only in the retail world is that really possible because they stock so many items. So I think that is a helpful sort of parameter for that type of client.
And then a lot of the projects don't have like heavy duty construction. So like we'll change the door hardware, but we're not like gutting the bathroom. We'll change the chandeliers and the decorative fixtures and redo the plants and make the entrance really cool, even from the outside. And we'll paint, and maybe we'll change the baseboard, but we're not ripping out the floor. And so I'm calling those hair and makeup. It ended up being construction light.
Yeah.
So that kind of was less interaction with contractors, more interaction with painters, which is wallpaper and electricians, and less projects that involved an entire general contractor team.
And then would you also say that your budget, like your overall budget, is going to be on the lower side for these projects? Like people have a certain amount that they want to spend.
Yeah, they definitely have a fixed amount and a fixed time frame. And interestingly enough, a lot of these people end up having vacation houses also that they want to sort of, it's a vacation house for their family, but they're also going to put it on Airbnb. So then we started having these branded components, and that reflected into the time frame as well, like creating something faster because we were getting it on the market. So it's these interesting hybrids of creating like a complete look. Like it has to be top to bottom complete. We did this Airbnb, and I mean, it's top to bottom. I did it like a boutique hotel, where the key is, even we made custom keys, and we made like a custom like sign for the outside, custom doormats. Like we still went to town and did, what do we call it? Photo shoot ready.
Yep. Yep.
I think that's also what my enjoyment is I get to have more photo shoots and more marketing and more styling. I think I enjoy the styling aspect, like buying all the coffee table books and finding the cool coasters and vintage, martini glasses.
Yeah.
And I really do think over the years, and Andy knows this because our projects were so big when we were at the large company that we met each other at. Those projects incorporated every aspect, but I always lean towards the styling and furnishings and color. So I think I really enjoy transforming spaces with, a big new area rug and a gorgeous wallpaper and like crazy cool new light fixtures. And all of a sudden it looks like a different space. And we really didn't even involve a contractor, hardly at all.
And I think that is the beauty about our business, right? There are so many aspects to the umbrella of design. We are two different structures under that same umbrella and are able to create beautiful things. And it really, like, some of it is just based on budget, some of it's based on time, all of it is based on creativity. What we have discovered when we're doing our show notes was sort of, because I think we've definitely talked about our billing practices and kind of like how to bill. I'm a flat fee fanatic at this point. And again, flat fees come after you have some kind of historical record in your own business about how long it takes you to do a project. And you have to be able to really go back over a number of projects to figure out what that aggregate is. So it's not something I recommend to
And
new.
we also teach people, our mentees,
Yeah,
we
how to
also
do that.
lead them through the process, and you can learn how to do it. But it is true, it is something that is very much learned.
Well, and it's just learned over, it is the value of experience that, because what I have changed from is an hours to dollars model. So from the hours to dollars model to, I evaluate the value of my services and I provide that as the fee. So because we were chatting about this a little bit ago as we were doing our show notes for this this pod, and as we get better and better, we get faster and faster. And
Mhm.
I am not at this point in my career willing to pass along the 20 years of experience where it takes me 5 minutes to pick out a lamp anymore to the
Mhm.
client. So like so I don't have an hourly design fee to even say like what that 5 minutes should cost, because I'm looking at the overall project and understanding that that living room is a $20,000 fee for me.
And
Um,
that's exactly
so
what all businesses should do, based on your ability to create something faster than someone else is part of the business profit center, and is one of the main ways to do business.
um, it, it's a great point. And I think that there's this, I think the old way of doing it was sort of bill like a lawyer. And again, if you're new, bill like
Yeah.
a lawyer. Don't, like every few
Yes.
minutes, do your
Yes. If you're
increments,
new.
make sure you're
Yep.
tracking the time. Um, but I have always been a rebel and tracking time has been hard for me. And so,
Mhm.
like that kind of structure for me, this structure works much better. But I had to do the tracking in order to understand how long it would take me. Because at the end of the day,
Yep.
the flat fee can bite me in the ass if I'm not looking
If
at
you're
the
not
project
careful.
correctly, and
Mhm.
I'm not understanding the scope of work correctly, or I'm letting the scope of work slide. So this is where the boundaries come in,
Yep.
because so we actually had a whole other topic for today's show and we pivoted. Um, because what
Even
we
that one for
realized,
another time.
yes, we will. But what we realized is manifesting your ideal client, like the universe is going to deliver those people to you. But as my friend Laura always says, and I know this isn't hers, but she says it a lot, so I'm attributing it to her. But we teach people how to treat us. And that's where the boundaries come in, because
Yep.
clients ask frequently, what is your hourly rate? I mean, I could tell you
Mhm.
I could make up an hourly rate, but
They love to ask that question, as if that answer is gonna somehow get them somewhere.
right. But what information does that really provide to somebody?
Nothing.
All they're going to do is
As
create.
if they can dictate how many hours it takes you to do your job in an industry that they don't even have any experience in. It would
No,
be like me telling my lawyer, well, it's only going to take you 1 hour to do that contract, and go to court for whatever. Like, no, it's their business. They
right.
tell you how much time it takes.
Yes.
But somehow our business gets this like attitude about, well, you're just, maybe it's because it's predominantly female, and much and also predominantly small businesses. Like, you wouldn't maybe do it if the design firm was, quite large and in a big established office.
I don't
um
know. I mean, I know a lot of
I
people
don't
that
know, there's some
have,
reason why our industry gets that question.
but I think the point is that the hourly rate doesn't actually provide any information, because no one knows how many hours it takes. So that's the second question usually. What's your hourly rate? How long will it take you to do my living room? How long does it take you to do a kitchen? Again, if you're a new designer, you might not know that. So, you might provide an estimate or a range, which I think is not a bad idea. And also understanding that at some point, this is like your university. You are,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you skipped school and went straight into business, my friend Tanya used to say, you either spend money on an education or you spend it in your business. So either way, it is the cost of life, right? Like this is just a cost of doing
Mm-hmm.
business. Like if you're going into business, but you don't have as much of the information as somebody that went to design school, you have to learn it on the job, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to learn it somewhere. And I think it's important to remember that these learning opportunities just make you better. And so
Yeah.
also it's a tax write-off. So there's a few things that like can come into play that help out in some of these moments, but the piece about the boundaries is, again, I can tell a client, well, I mean, it's going to be $300 an hour and I'm going to spend 80 hours on your kitchen. And that's not a terrible amount of time to think that one may spend on a kitchen, especially as you're starting out. It doesn't take me 80 hours to do a kitchen anymore. So I personally am not going to tell a client that. What I'm going to do is say, I'm going to charge you a retainer for the beginning of your project so that we can define the scope of work. And once that's defined, I will give you and again, I have given them a sheet, the good, better, best budget that available on the website, where they have a sense of what quality level they want to get to. And so that's almost always my first step, is to understand, like, can you afford to do a project? Not even with me, but a project, right? And the other piece of that, this is if you're doing construction, furnishings is a little different. I'll let Julie take the furnishing side, but the construction side is, contractors range in price. Like everybody's a little different. They all bill a little differently, just like we do. And so, but a client is looking for, I think, a fairly complete picture, and they're looking at us as the expert, right? So I want to be able, as the expert, to say, hey, it is, kitchens are between $1,400 and $1,800 a square foot. Sorry, bathrooms are between $1,400 and $1,800 a square foot. And that includes all the materials. Like that's just giving them, so if somebody goes and measures their bathroom, they can get a very quick understanding of how much that bathroom might cost. And if they decide to go with really expensive materials, the 1,800 goes out the window and it's something much higher. But it really gives like a fast snapshot. That doesn't include my design fee. That's just giving them like, right now in
materials,
the
labor,
climate, construction and labor are around $60,000 to $80,000 for a typical bathroom. And I'm like talking your 5x8 bathtub with a shower over, a single sink and a toilet, right? And while
in the Bay Area,
and many of
which
you might be
is
like,
one of the most expensive markets in the country.
yeah, but that's just what the going costs are right now. I don't make up numbers, they just are.
No, I just think it's good because some cities aren't the same pricing structure.
100%. But like here, that is actually a very typical number.
I think any of the major cities are going to be at that same price point.
Yeah.
Los Angeles, Miami, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to remember is kitchens and bathrooms are incredibly high function use spaces.
Yep.
And they have the most materials of any other room in the house, right? So that's why they get these. And again, so like your bathrooms are actually higher cost because they're tiny spaces, but they have the most amount of materials. Kitchens are going to have more materials because they're bigger square footage, but they actually don't have as many functions. But
how does that come into play? Because kitchens have appliances and bathrooms don't.
Yeah, but the square foot price seems to be roughly like $400 less per. So like if a bathroom,
but like a kitchen only has a sink and a faucet, whereas a bathroom has a tub and a sink and a faucet and a shower head and a controller and a body spray.
It's just this per square foot price is higher for a bathroom than it is for a kitchen. Like it's just the square footage. So like you could be prepared to spend between $50,000 and $80,000 in labor and materials on a bathroom, and you could spend 80 to 100 on a kitchen.
Mhm.
Right now I'm seeing like we're doing a facelift. That kitchen is and it's a big kitchen. So yeah, the my point was that the typical bathroom has a higher per square foot than the typical kitchen. And it's mainly because it's the amount of materials that go into that very tiny space that jacks up the price. And then a kitchen, well, you have appliances, you've got stone countertops and fabrication and cabinetry, like all of those things are expensive. But when you do the per square foot calculation, it just comes out to slightly less. So
Yeah.
it's just a funny formula. But again, like,
Well, it could be like in a bathroom, you have a big mirror and glass, and then you do technically have more plumbing fixtures than, and maybe that just adds up to be more per square foot, like you said. That makes sense.
yeah. So it's just sort of, it's the amount of materials, it's the application of those materials, and it's the fixtures themselves that tend to be more costly. And again, people like have a they're going to have a budget. So my thing is I want to be able to give a client an amount of money and understand that they can afford the project before we
Mhm.
move on to any other conversation. So they get like the project snapshot, like, oh, I want to do 2 kitchens and a bathroom. Okay, well then expect to spend between 50 and 80 per bathroom, and between 100 and 200 for the kitchen. And
Mhm.
um and that's without even measuring, right? I'm just like throwing this out there. The other way that I'm calculating a flat fee is I'm looking at the complexity of the design, because if the design is more complex than a typical design for me, I'm going to have to charge more for that. So, but again, these are conversation starters. So it's the budget. And then I want to get that retainer and, provide
Mhm.
as much information to the client so that as we start to work together, I am giving them the information that they need in order to feel comfortable hiring me.
Mhm.
And ultimately that's what it is. And so the more information that clients have, the better they feel and the easier
Yeah.
it is for them to select a yes or a no.
Yes.
And so when we are withholding information, I think that that is the thing that comes back and is really difficult to clean up at the end, because if you know the information, give it. If you don't know the information, say it. No one's going to penalize you for not knowing something if you're willing to investigate how to answer their question. But I think because that does show a level of professionalism, and it's just, I think the authenticity and the honesty are better than making something up. Um, because you can always come back later with the right answer, or an answer that you feel comfortable giving, where when we're talking about money and fees and all these other things, like ranges are perfectly acceptable. um
Yeah.
so and then
And
similar.
I always look at a project as like if I was going to write a book,
Yep.
I'm going to outline the book. And of course, I don't know what I'm going to put in every single chapter, but I know that there's a beginning and a middle and an end of the book. And that it's going to roughly be, let's say 20 chapters or however many. Oh, well, this part of the story and then this and then that. Okay, so that's about 20 chapters, let's say. And it's okay, like Andy said, if you don't know. Of course, I don't know what all the chapters are going to say exactly. That's part of the design process.
Yep.
But if I give my client an outline of this process, start to what I like to call photo shoot ready, and um, you can, I mean, I can, and Andy can too, we can price that whole thing. And I understand if you're inexperienced and you're not at that point yet, but like she just said, you still can be a professional and create this overall outline. Like, that at the end of the project, they're going to need art and accessories. And you don't want to wait till the end, like after you've designed all the custom sofas and everything else, and then it's installed, and then you didn't even think about the artwork. So it's good to give the client a complete picture. I'm a huge fan of that personally.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think,
I know we both are.
yeah, I think for us that I mean, and personally, what I found in doing the flat fee has just eliminated like 90% of the frustration on the client side is
Mhm.
the ability to accurately provide a number uh, between my design fee and the project costs. That means that I'm showing them things within their budget. I'm sticking to the budget that we agreed to. I'm sticking to the
Mhm.
fee that we agreed to. And that, so if I did forget the art and accessories at the end, I'm going to have to come back to them not only with an accessories and art budget, but also a design fee based on that budget. Whereas if I include that all at the beginning, I don't have to worry about a hard conversation at the end, because a lot of times, and we've seen this over and over again, but I think a couple things, right? So if you're not comfortable talking about money, I think that's a red flag for a client.
Yeah.
Your comfort level in talking about money with a client is incredibly confidence building. And if you don't have it, get it. Like, find people to talk about budgets, find people to talk about your worth as a designer. Find people, right? These are conversations that have to happen in order for you to run this part of your business successfully. And um and all it is doing is putting the client in trust, because they know
Mhm.
literally they can and trust you with thousands of dollars, and that it's not going to be mismanaged.
Yeah.
It's not going to be um bungled in any way, that you know what you're doing. And so like, this is the distinction, I would say, between having a hobby and having a business,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And my desire as a design professional is that more and more people are stepping into really owning and having a business versus doing something that becomes a business sort of without any intention.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen a lot. And so I know how quickly
Yeah.
you can get swept up with like, oh my gosh, I have 3 projects and now 4 and now 5 and now suddenly, but I don't have any tools. That's a really, really hard position to be in. And
Well, we can
doesn't
tell
have to be
you
that way.
how that's going to end. That's going to end up being, you could turn into having an expensive hobby if
Yep.
you don't have tools to manage your projects, like you just said, Andy,
Yep.
because it's so easy to have, oh, I have 2 projects. Now I have 4. I mean, because our work is something that just about everyone needs. I mean,
Yeah.
anytime I meet anyone and they find out, what we do for our work, there's great interest.
Yeah.
Like, and so having more work is like, it's gonna happen. You're gonna, that's the good news.
Yeah. It's true.
But I think, we really want to caution you from having an expense. The difference between having an expensive hobby is a business that isn't organized, doesn't know how to create budgets from the scratch with the client to get it on track, versus a design professional is someone who has I mean, they have a ton of skills and can draft and everything else that we know how to do. But one of the things is knowing how to have a budget, creating the budget from the beginning. We have budgets on our website that we offer and mentor people with, that are, that way you have 3 different price points and it's a total budget of all the spaces and all the things that we've thought about, complete big list.
Yep.
But I think the other thing to talk about as well is with money. Number one, from a non-emotional, getting into the emotion part second. But the first thing with money is knowing how much things cost. How many hours does it take me to do this? How much does a contractor charge for painting something or whatever? Stone fabrication is, you could take the price of the slab and just double it, because that's how much stone fabrication costs. Like, you need to know all from top to bottom.
Yep.
Why does a painter charge $40,000 to do the whole house? Like, you need to know all of these things. So you need to know how much stuff costs, including your time and your effort, and your staff, them as well. But then the other thing is, maybe there's emotion in the money and discomfort. And what is that emotion? Is it a lack of confidence? It's like Andy and I were just talking. are you, what's it called? Devaluing your worth
Yeah. That's
and
a good one.
therefore not. And so it's interesting when you talk about money, it's almost like two sides of like, there's the nuts and the bolts, like you got to know this is what stuff goes for. And then there's the, is there any emotion there?
Yeah.
Are you worried? Are you um a people pleaser? Are you ashamed? Like, are you being a perfectionist, like being too hard on I used to be, I think, way too hard on myself. That I wasn't doing something,
Yeah.
I don't know, like I was being a perfectionist, and through that perfectionism I was being really hard on myself. And these are things that I've had to grow out of. And part of that was being then turned into being a people pleaser, and then you're taking on things that maybe aren't as intentional, like we talked about in the beginning with boundaries and intention and having ideal projects. And so think about, are there emotions to my money conversations? And you really want to clean that stuff up before you start having professional conversations with potential clients.
I mean, and here's the thing, if you don't, you're going to have to deal with it in the moment. And sometimes it gets messy. And again, that's part of,
Yeah.
like the learning process. And so, I think that there's always an opportunity, but I think what happens with creating the boundaries ahead of time and understanding, like, what are clients going to ask us? What do we need to be able to tell them to make them feel safe? Because ultimately, this is creating a relationship with a stranger, right? Like, we're going into someone's house,
Mhm.
never met before. They have to decide whether or not they want to work with you. And often that's based on your level of authenticity. Whether they like your work. But I would say
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, like, it's the gut feeling that somebody gets when they're with you. And if you're scared,
Yeah.
that's a pretty, like, 5, nope, sorry, 7% of our conversation communication is verbal and
Mhm.
90% is nonverbal. So
Which
when
is
we
body language
yeah. So if you're scared,
and energetics, I would
yeah,
say, like mindset and energetics and emotion.
but our subconscious mind picks up on all of the things about another human before we can even process what's going on. So, for instance, I heard this story, and I've had experiences like this of my own, but this is just one tangible, um, where a man and a woman were talking, and she walked away and then went and told her friend, like, I don't know what it is about that guy, but I don't trust him. And
Mhm.
I don't like him, and I don't want to do business with him. And the
Gut
friend
check.
who's quite well versed in body communication and all these other things, he said, "Oh, I can tell you why you don't want to." And she's like, "Why?" And he goes, "Because your subconscious picked up on everything that he wasn't saying, and it was
Mhm.
untrustworthy, and there was something about it that your subconscious was telling you not to work with him." And
Yeah.
the same thing is true for our clients. It's not that we're not nice, good people. I mean,
Mhm.
I have never met a designer I didn't like, like not one time.
Yeah,
We're
yeah, they're
all
usually pretty nice.
we're all pretty personable. I think we all, I mean, I'm on
Definitely.
vacation, so I'm wearing a sweatshirt. But most of the time I think we dress with our personal signature style. We've got great accessories. Like, we are oftentimes our own calling card. So the presentation that we walk in with, even if, this is the first meeting, is our put togetherness. But it can't just be exterior. Like, I used to refer
Yeah.
to my work uniform as like, oh, putting on my armor, thinking that that was enough to really protect me. So, like, my makeup, my hair, and my clothes felt like this suit of armor that, while soft and pretty, uh I felt like I was putting on this persona that would create this veil of professionalism and other things. And what I learned, sometimes the hard way, was that looking great also contributes to how I feel. But if I don't know my business inside out, if I don't have the answer to a question and I'm not willing to say that, I I feel really vulnerable otherwise. And that vulnerability gets communicated as fear. It gets communicated as struggle or resistance. It gets communicated, like all these things get communicated. And suddenly the client's like, ooh, I thought I was really going to enjoy that meeting. Didn't work out for me. Right.
Kind of
Because
created a
their
lack of
subconscious,
trust for the client.
yeah, their subconscious is telling them things too. So,
Yeah.
so I think that while, your personality is probably your most winning aspect, like the thing that is maybe going to set you apart beyond that is having these systems and structures. And so part of the
Yeah. Well, my
structure,
favorite thing, and I've told you this a million times, is that quote that A Rod Alexander, what's his name? Alexander Rodriguez from the Yankees.
Alex, yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah, Al A Rod, right? He has this famous quote that I just keep going back to, and he says the difference of what sets apart someone who's extremely successful and really high ranking in their field is two things. They do the fundamentals really well. Like the most basic thing, they just go back over it and they're like a killer at the fundamentals. So that would be like a budget, knowing I know how much a sink costs, I know how much a faucet costs, I know how much it costs to paint this cabinet, I know how much it costs to build this cabinet. Like
Or how
really
much a
think of
sofa is,
yourself,
whatever your niche
a
is.
sofa, a custom sofa, a retail sofa,
Yeah.
a leather sofa, a fabric sofa. Like you're just like a technician. You're just like fundamental. That's like the ballet dancer that what's it called when you warm up at the bar, the ballet dancers spend like maybe an hour just warming up and they do the same thing over and over every single day. They go back and practice those same set of fundamental moves. And with for us it's the budget, it's having these set tool, we call them tools and standards, but those are the fundamentals. And then the second thing that he says, which I think is such a great quote, is then you have to have the confidence.
Yeah.
And he says, I understand you don't have confidence overnight, but like there's a way to build on your confidence. And that's what you're talking about with this body language and making sure that you've gone through your emotions. Money can be very emotional. All of that stuff. And so it's coming through as a confident body language. I can talk about it. I'm also a technician and I've dealt with my emotions. So that's going to make you what we like to call a killer.
Yeah. Yeah. So creating these boundaries. So like if a client asks, again, we're going back to this like hourly thing, but if a client asks me how much I make per hour, but I don't have an hourly estimate, then like the math they're doing, they're gonna exponentially decide like, oh my God, it could be $200,000 in design fees. I don't want to spend that. And I
Yeah.
mean, it
And
could
you
be
don't
if it was
even.
like a really big house. I mean, I've charged $200,000 for design fees on houses, and that's because they were a big house. I mean, that the house
Yeah.
required that much time and effort, and so that $200,000 wasn't a big deal. But because the house was like $7 million, so right at the end of the
And
day,
it took
200 grand isn't that crazy,
2 years.
right?
Yeah.
So again, like I think the context of these questions is important. So, being prepared for those questions and understanding like what the scope of work is before you go in. So so if the client is asking that either on the phone or in person, you're ready, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the ready just means that you have thought about it and
Mm-hmm.
that this is your standard. Like this is what you have decided is your protocol for your office, and this is how you move forward in your
Yeah.
projects. And so again, it's just this container for the client to feel safe inside of, so that they know that
Yeah.
step inside the container of your framework, that they are held safely and that the project can move forward, because you have an understanding of your business, even if you're just starting out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's certainly mentorship, there's other ways of um figuring things out, but I think those are super helpful in order
Mm-hmm.
to create your ideal client, because your ideal client is going to come with their own set of fear, their own set of concern, their own set of
They
timeline, their own
sure.
set of budget, right? So like you have to be in alignment with what they are looking for, or their alignment has to be flexible enough to meet where you are, because maybe you have a room minimum, maybe you have a set amount of, like, it's a $50,000 spend in order for you to be able to work with them. So a lot of people have different ways of defining what their ideal client. It's not just like the energetics of, he's really nice and she's a stay-at-home mom, right? Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are great. But they're not necessarily like the parameters that you want to, there, it's in addition to, right? It's those
Yeah.
kinds of things in addition to, they're willing to work with, because we actually, at our old firm, again, another little example, but we had a client that came in. I think I was at that point a junior designer. I had graduated from intern to junior designer. It was my first design job. And Julie was the project manager and designer on this project. And they didn't want to spend money on markup. They were adamant that they wanted no markup and a high design fee. And that wasn't something our firm had done before, but they were willing to negotiate.
Yeah, they didn't care how many hours something took because they were lawyers. So they were thinking hours, they get it. They know how much time. And so you read the person, they were a lawyer, so they understand time billing. So we said, okay. But for whatever reason, they said, we don't want to charge a markup because, you know, their aunt had a purchasing license. You know, a lot of, you'll hear those type of stories. That, and that's how we came.
Interior designer. That's
It's always
all the time.
somebody, because it's really not that difficult to get a
retail.
what is it called? A seller's permit. And so then we came up with this new formula,
which happened to be very, very profitable. So there's no one way of running the business. I think what we're hoping to hammer home is it's your way. And within that way that you have specified, that you are going through and really answering all the questions that a client would ask so that they can be a full yes to your way of doing business. And that's ultimately the boundary setting that we're talking about. And so the frequently asked questions, the other one is, so is, what was the hour?
Are you gonna, the second frequently asked question is, basically, are you gonna give me it at cost, or are you gonna mark it up?
Yeah.
Those are the two questions you're gonna get. Do you mark up, and how much is your hour and our hourly? And our point is, neither of the answers to that question is gonna help that client.
Right.
At all. It's the same thing. Well, I was likening it to saying, well, I'm gonna order in delivery, you know, I'm gonna order dinner to be delivered to my house. And whether or not this restaurant charges me a delivery fee or this one doesn't, it's equivalent to making your decision based on that. Well, dinner's going to cost $70 for two people. So whether or not they charge you a fee to deliver or not, you're still going to order dinner.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't like it. But every client, a lot of people ask that question, and I always say, okay, it's our job to be the leader here. Yep. And guide them through this process, because that doesn't tell them what their results are going to be. That's what they're paying for, is the finished product.
Oh my gosh, I just had a perfect yes. And okay, this reminds me of the time I tried to fly on Spirit Airlines. I'm a Southwest loyalist usually, and Spirit Airlines will advertise at like 30 to 40% less than every other airline. And I was like, wow, it's a great deal. I had no knowledge of any of what they did before. So then I'm like, buy that ticket. Oh, I have to pay for my seat. Okay. That's weird. Never had to pay for a seat before. So and then suddenly, like, I'm paying for a carry-on luggage, which I've also never paid for before. And by the time I had like gone through this process of buying a seat, buying the luggage, the plane ticket was more than the other competitors, and I had wasted my time, which I'm a huge fan of not wasting time. So inefficiency really irks me. So yes, I've never flown Spirit Airlines because that whole process was so irritating to me that I decided to just bag it. And
they nickel and dimed you, and you ended up at the same price as the other one.
Right.
Without saying it. They didn't say it up front, which is what an inexperienced professional might run the risk of doing is what we're trying to say is don't run the risk of not giving them the complete outline example I gave of this is the project.
Yep.
Like you're going to get done with this project and you're going to want to have some money for art and accessories too. I always say that because they'll think, oh, well, I know I need a sofa and I know I need window coverings and I know I need this coffee table and this dining and this da da da. But then I'm always like, and we need to add amount in the budget for the art and accessories. And sometimes people don't want to hear that, but then as you get through the process they realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a complete space and it's not going to be completely decorated. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I kept this line item on here for you so that you truly have a complete experience. Not having art and accessories is like not charging you for your luggage up front or your seat up front.
And so, and because of my personality, like I do, and I'm not unique, you guys. I don't think that I'm like the only person in the world who gets irritated by not having a full picture. And I think ultimately, like people want to know what it's going to cost. They want to know how long it's going to take, and they want to know what it's going to look like. And so I think so what we're talking about in addition to boundaries is also expectations. And those do go hand in hand. And the thing about the art and accessories, which is just feeling very poignant right now, is that somebody is looking at Pinterest or a magazine or house, and they are looking at these rooms and are like, I want my house to look like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have money in the budget for art and accessories. The expectation of the Elle Decor room versus
Mm-hmm.
what we're able to give them, it's not the same, right?
Yeah.
That photo shoot ready project is going to look more like the Elle Decor inspiration because there's a mirror, there's art, there's candlesticks, there's tchotchkes on the shelves, and there's books and there's lighting.
Yeah.
If pieces don't make it in, then, and I get it. Like, I mean, I've had many budgets cut because construction ran over and then I didn't have as
Yeah.
much money as I wanted for the furnishing side. And I've been on that end for, probably every construction project I've ever done that included furnishing.
Yeah.
And so the thing to remember is, again, like you have to set the expectations. Like if your client is looking at an image and thinking their house is going to come out like that, but they don't include it in the budget, you as the professional have to tell them that's not included. That's extra.
Yep.
That could
Exactly.
certainly be phase two. I'm a big fan of phasing, but again, I want people to understand what they're actually getting. And so
Yeah.
it's setting expectations, it's creating boundaries, and it's also creating clarity so that people
Yeah.
really step into choosing you,
Yeah.
choosing your
Exactly.
business, because that's
And
ultimately
as we like to say, get to the no's faster, get to the yeses faster,
100%.
meaning these boundaries, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, I had to learn how to set boundaries. And I think that's a common thing that a lot of us have to learn how to set boundaries. And so we've done that. We've learned how to do it. I know it can be hard. I know it can be emotional, but the goal, or I should say, the beauty of setting boundaries is that you get to the no's faster, you get to the yeses faster. It's like getting to your dream husband or partner faster. Don't you want to start living your dream life sooner? And the sooner that you stop interacting and engaging with the people who really are, they're a no, because if they really got the full price, like Andy was saying with Spirit Airlines, she would be a no. If she knew the real information up front, she would have just gone to Southwest and she would have been a no for Spirit Airlines. And so the faster we can get to our no's, because I know that can be scary, the faster we can allow the yeses to come in, the yes clients, the clients who know that Andy paints on Mondays. And those type of people that, like, there was some quote, I think I sent it to you, Andy, and it was something like, if you don't want to work with someone for a year, then don't work with them for one day.
Yeah.
And that's the courage to get to the no faster. The faster you can get to someone being a no, if their no is because of pricing or time, it's not good for your schedule, but for whatever the reason is, it's not a good match. Don't be afraid to get to those no's faster, because the flip side is having the yeses come in
So true.
faster also.
So true.
And that's like actually kind of a basic sales technique anyways. So we just want to encourage you, don't be afraid of that. I know that it can be emotional. It has been emotional for me in the past, and I had to work through it. And that's one of the reasons why we're here
Yep.
coaching you guys today.
I also, it's funny because I think there's a lot of people when we're first starting out, and this for sure was us. I know it was us, where you are dependent on income. And so you're taking things and you're taking
Yeah.
things. So part of this conversation about the ideal client is, at what point can you start to be discerning? At what point
Yeah.
can you say no? Because it's not just the client saying no. Sometimes that project isn't right for you. And
Yeah.
and that's honoring your own boundaries and understanding that, like, whether it's not a great fit personality wise, like when you're saying no, you're also saying yes to something else. And so
Right.
um, and that is terrifying, right? Sometimes it is terrifying.
It is
So I'm not
terrifying.
going to tell
Can
you
be.
say no if your
Yeah.
mortgage is due and you're like, I really don't have the money in the bank, I've got to say yes to this right now. Of course you're going to say yes. Of course you're going to say yes. I think
Right.
that the time, so like that is what we call survival mode, when you're sort of
And
like,
it's okay to be in survival mode. We understand that you can look at that as, oh, maybe that's the 6 months right here is my survival mode. And then in this other amount of time, I shift into thrive mode.
also
And
call
so
that.
if we're talking to you and you're like, oh my God, I'm in survival, I can't even like deal with this, we totally understand. Just understand that you look at it as a chapter of time that you're going to move through with these tools. These tools are going to, and this mindset is going to pull you through that survive into thrive.
Yes. And we also refer to this sometimes as startup mode, but what happens frequently
Yeah.
seen is that startup mode becomes the mode of operating, and it's not a sustainable way of life. And so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
when it really becomes like you're stuck in the survive and you really want to start moving into the thrive. And so it's
Yeah.
being aware of those things. But once you are, amassing amount of money, like the projects are profitable, you're not working, spending all of your time working, you're actually able to work in the business on the business instead of just in the business. Uh,
Exactly.
that is sort of the time frame where you want to again revisit this ideal client. And I think too, like, the blue sky is great, but you still need the experience of working with people to really understand, like, who is your ideal client, because
Right.
everybody's is different. Like my desire, and I'm a pretty approachable, easy to work with person, I think. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty able to work with like a lot of different styles and a few different personalities. Um, and so it's easy for me to, but like I draw the line. Like if somebody just doesn't feel like a kind person, I am absolutely not
Yes.
going to work with them.
Well, I think that's the gut check.
Yeah, because often, I mean, I was having this conversation with a friend who was having a difficult time with their client, and she's like, they seem so nice in the beginning. And I was like, well, no one's ever going to reveal themselves to be a monster the first time around. It's so rare, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, but I think, so again, this is part of your boundary setting. Like your contract should have a clause that says you can quit whenever you want.
Yeah.
I get that that means that you won't get the full fee. You'll get some of the fee. Or you might have to refund some of the fee. And if you're in the middle of orders, you're going to have to fulfill those orders. Like, I'm not saying it isn't messy, but I have fired clients in the middle of a project because I got a call, literally, folks, on Christmas Eve with a client yelling at
Yeah.
me because their cabinetry was installed incorrectly. Well, I'm not the cabinet installer and I'm not the contractor. I don't manage that. And I don't like, I designed it. There were drawings, details, and instructions that they did not follow.
Yeah. And why did they need to talk to someone about it on Christmas Eve?
Well, and again, like the contractor didn't set the timeline. I had told them that they started the day after Thanksgiving. They for sure were not going to be in their house by Christmas. And somehow that like went in one ear and out the
Oh
other.
no. Yeah.
Well, because
Yeah.
I also think the contractor didn't set the correct expectations. And he was like, oh, I think we can do it. And I was like, you're effing crazy.
Yeah.
And so again, it created a problem for me that I had said that wasn't possible. The contractor, who
Yeah.
was in fact in charge of the timeline, said it
Yeah.
was possible, and then he didn't deliver. And so as the designer, and I'm the client advocate, I often get those phone calls. But for me, oh, here's the other thing. So oftentimes we don't know if there's a boundary until it's crossed. And what that
That's true. Yeah.
bad. It feels bad when your boundaries are crossed, right? You might get angry, you might get sad, you might feel hurt. But it doesn't feel good when your boundaries are crossed. And so
Right.
you'll know as soon as it happens. And so for me, I was on the phone and I'm just taking this call, and this man is irate and he's yelling. And my sister actually walked into the room and mouthed to me, "Who is on the phone with you?" And I said, "A client." And then she mouthed back, "What the F?" And and it kind of like kicked me into this moment where I was like, wait, I am not willing to be abused. That is not my
Yeah.
job description. I am not your punching bag and I never will be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said, client, it's Christmas Eve. There's nothing I can do. I am on vacation until January the 2nd, and I will call you back
Yeah.
then and discuss this. But your emergency is not my emergency.
Yep.
And I will speak to you then. And I hung up.
Yeah.
And he called
And
back.
that's being a professional.
He called back 3 times and I didn't answer. And in the week that I had, so Christmas Eve to January 2nd, I sat with myself and did like a lot of journaling and decided that while he felt it was appropriate to speak to his wife and children the way that he had spoken to me, I
Yeah.
am not part of his family and I don't agree with
Yeah.
his assessment of speaking to anyone that way. And
Yep.
I certainly wasn't going to be a part of that tribe. And so
Yep.
I wrote them a letter and I said, please understand that this constitutes the completion of our working together. I am
Mm-hmm.
honoring my contract and giving you 10 days notice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrapped up everything, even though it was during my vacation. I just didn't want to come back and have 10 extra days of time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I did what I needed to do on my side to make sure that I was furnishing what I had been paid for. And then,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just said that we were no longer working together. So I sent everything electronically. And the contractor came back to me and was like, hey, the fireplace isn't done. You were in charge of getting the fireplace. Can we please still? And I said, I will not have any communication with those clients anymore. I'm done.
Yeah.
You want to facilitate the plaster, I will give you the information. I said, but this is the caveat. I said, if he is in any way abused and comes back to me and tells me that there was some issue or he was spoken to in a way that was anything but professional and kind, he is to leave, be paid in full, and never return. And I don't care if it's done or
Yeah.
not. And so I created
Right.
a container for the vendor
Yep.
that it's my responsibility to protect from my client, because sometimes we do have to do that. And so
Yep.
they agreed and we went ahead and moved forward, and he was paid and nothing happened. He was able to finish the job. But
Yeah.
I just had to set a really firm boundary with them because in my opinion, they were abusive. And I don't think that that's my
Yeah.
job. Not my job
That is.
held out by a client. My
Yeah.
job.
And that's part of understanding what the boundaries are is behavior.
And I had a dad that yelled at me a lot. So it wasn't unfamiliar, but I had never been yelled at in a professional capacity like that by a person
Yeah.
who was serving and providing services to. And,
Yeah.
and I just made the decision that was not part of how I wanted to be treated. And I decided that, despite the fact that they paid quite easily. They paid whatever I asked and whenever I asked. They
Yeah.
really wrote me checks on the spot. It was fantastic.
Yeah. But
That
part of the
my
cruelty wasn't,
yeah, that wasn't for them.
cruelty was the broke the camel's back.
Yep. That part of me wasn't for sale. I wasn't willing to be a whipping post for someone
Yeah.
that needed to take their anger out on
Yep.
someone
And we
else.
obviously don't recommend that anyone is treated that way.
No, but again, I mean, like that was a boundary that I had to have crossed in order for me to understand that I needed to set it. And I will say that
Yep.
since I did set that boundary, I haven't had another client that has yelled.
And I think that's the thing about the get to the nose faster, like because Andy was courageous, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to stand in that moment and say, no, I'm done. And not get caught up in emotion and all this other stuff. But that was getting to the no faster, because then that door needed to be closed so that the right door could be opened. And usually we find that as soon as you create those levels of clarity, those other doors fly open
It's true.
very quickly. Obviously, it takes mindset, like we said at the beginning. It does take mindset that you do internally and personally in your own space and time that you're not like advertising about. But that mindset shift will allow and staying in alignment. Like if someone acted like that and you didn't stay in mental alignment with what you know to be the proper boundaries to have, you could run the risk of having another one of those episodes. But what we're saying is keep your boundaries. It's a courageous act. And then it's scary, but don't be afraid to take that leap, because on the other side are some really beautiful open doors.
Well, Julie, you have a similar story about not being paid. So do you want to share that?
Which one? I can't remember.
I mean, I guess I'll tell the story then.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, tell
About
it.
that
I
ahead of
can't.
time,
I mean,
but
there's so many projects, I can't remember
well,
which
but I
ones
think
are.
so there's some expectations like, so Julie had sent out a time bill and then the time bill wasn't paid, but the client had this expectation that she would continue working. And she was like, well, no, right? Like I need to be paid before I continue any more work on the project, because it's foolish to think I'm going to continue working and then you're going to pay me the double the fee at that point. So, right. Like,
Mhm.
in her case, I don't want to speak for you, but in your case, the boundary that was enacted was protecting your intellectual property by needing to be paid in order to continue working on the project.
They must have been like 2 months late on bills or something like that. I still can't remember which one it was.
Okay.
But usually, obviously, all of us allow at the maximum 30 days to be paid. Like ideally you get paid right away. Ideally, obviously setting up the project, getting the retainer up front, so you're always sort of have that in a escrow account, so to speak, as a pad. Like technically you're not supposed to work past that retainer amount, and then you have your monthly bills that go out, and then they have maybe up to 30 days to pay those at the most. So if someone gets past 30 days and you're into month number 2, that's when you have to put the brakes on. And I mean, there's been quite a few people that I've had to remind, like, when I worked at the big firm in New York City and we had a huge, billionaire client, and, they just want everything now, and they move really fast. It has to happen now, now, now. It's New York City. It's a real fast paced environment. And I had to say, hey, like, we need to have your husband. I mean, they were good for it. We do need you guys to pay these invoices before we can give you these other, areas that you want us to design. And then, boy, did they pay those checks fast when you stop work. But yeah, I usually find that if you start to get into the second month, within the 60-day period, that is when you have to put your foot down and truly stop working and let them know that they have to get caught up.
Yep. And I think
luckily I've never been stiffed or anything like that. But that's why you have the retainer. And so if you have the retainer, let's say that's 1 month, and then you bill your month to month to month. And then, so if someone starts to get late, that's the retainers covering that. But that's when you have to set the alarm bells, because now we're dipping into it's like your savings account that you're supposed to apply, technically, you're supposed to apply the retainer to the last bill of the project. So the retainer is given up front, just like a security deposit on an apartment. Retainer is given up front, and it's supposed to, and of course, I understand that a lot of times it's a cash infusion for a small business. So technically you might use that money right then and there, but technically you're supposed to hold it in a separate account, and it gets applied to like the last part of the project as far as how you manage your cash flow internally. And that's how you always are okay. You're not going to get stiffed.
And that's if you charge hourly. So if you charge flat fees like I do, I break down the project so they get the full amount, and then the project is broken down into phases of deliverables. And at the end of each phase of deliverable, so I do take a retainer, or I take that first payment, which is somewhat of a retainer. So payment up front, and then I work through that. And then the next, at that deliverable phase, I take that payment up front and work through that. And so that's how I have combated, fees and lateness and things like that. And again, boundaries around purchasing things for clients before they've paid. I know some designers who have a lot of comfort doing that. I don't recommend it. I think it's pretty risky. I've done it. I don't love it. And so I think that there are just pieces. So like you put all this stuff in your contract, or you put it in writing in an email, so that you're setting the expectations. And I think a lot of people, I used to be a teacher, so there's a couple, so understanding how people learn is one of the things I learned. And some of that is, some people are great at hearing things and they don't read things. Other people love to read things, miss everything you say. And most of us are in fact visual, like we all understand visual things. And so I love doing a snapshot of a project and giving somebody like a really tiny summary of, design fee, contractor fee, product fee. Then they don't have to go through a million documents. It's all in one place. It's right in their file. They always have access to it. But I still have all those other pieces of information as well. I just want to make sure that, the easy to access information is short and sweet as possible. I had a client one time that told me, she's like, this is too much. I just need the Twitter.
Yeah, the Twitter client. Yeah.
And
it's
I've
true.
never forgotten that. Like, I didn't realize how helpful bullet points could be. And so, just, I think we do want to use flowery and sometimes soft language when we're communicating with clients. And oftentimes these are incredibly busy, high functioning people who don't need soft sentences. They just need information. And so
they need to know, where are they taking action and where are you taking action? Who's responsible? Which court, whose ball
is the court
is in whose court? Like a lot of times you have to remind a client, like we do at end of the week, weekly client status emails. So the client gets a status email at the end on a Friday, so they know this is where the project is at, which is really helpful. And it brings out conversation. If something's running late, the client can remind us of some deadline or, something they hadn't thought of. But also, if the client has an open proposal, like for furniture that they need to pay for, I'll put that at the very top of the email, because that's the one action item that I need them to take. The rest of it is kind of like delivery status and stuff that they can just read if they want. They don't have to if they don't want to. But so if I need them to take action, I'll put it at the top. And hey, obviously in friendly reminder, reattaching this is the open furniture proposal. If you want to get these items to move forward, let us know when you can submit payment. And that way they get it right at the top. And so it's like, oh, that's on me as the client, and the rest is on the design team. Okay, got it. I think that really helps.
Yes. And I was going to say, the other thing about the Friday email that I love is it answers a lot of questions, so they don't have to call you on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
Yeah.
right? So there's no like question marks. So it's helpful to have those reminders going out. And again, that's sort of setting a boundary within your business. It's a process and a procedure, right? So every Friday, whether it's you or support team, somebody is sending that email out. And so these are, you can call it a boundary, you can call it a structure, you can call it a system, whatever you name it, it is a repeatable piece that protects you every week, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and so that really, I think, having an ideal client is great, but they only stay ideal when they're given as much information as possible so that they feel safe and secure.
Yeah.
And so that's how we create the ideal client. Like, we're going to manifest that person and keep manifesting the people that we want to work with, because the universe is aligning those souls with our souls, and bringing us, and I'm not discounting marketing and anything else, but as somebody who has a fully word of mouth business, and has never been slow, I know that it's partially due, actually significantly due to my own mindset work that I put out. And I am constantly evaluating what projects I want and need in my business. So that's the other part of that, is it's not just like, oh, how about 6 bathrooms right now? Well, how about a furnishings project too? Right. So I'm looking at that. So it's a partnership between me and the universe, but I'm creating my ideal client. Like, that person is coming to me, but they are maintaining that ideal client status because I am being a good partner in this process and providing them with everything that they need to know in order to feel, Julie does the same thing. Like, our clients feel held and well taken care of because they are. It's not an accident.
Yeah. And because most people don't know how the process is, like, well, what's going to happen next? And they might think, a lot of people think, well, the first thing I should do is go shop for sofas. And they'll tell me that, oh, we're going shopping for sofas this weekend. And the first thing I want to say is, please don't. Because that's not the process, but they don't know what the process is. They think they're being helpful, but they want to.
Then you
Yes,
say,
so
don't
part of
go
taking
shopping for
care
that.
of them is like, what is the process? I'm reminding you, we're in schematic now, or we're in programming. Now we're in schematic. Now we're developing. Now we're pricing and value engineering. Now we're in documentation. Now we're in construction, and they don't know. I mean, of course they don't know that stuff. So that's part of taking care of them, is knowing where they're at. And that's why the Friday emails and different meetings that you have with them help. That's keeping the boundaries together. And I think I'm hoping that we won you over on why to have boundaries on this episode. But the other thing about boundaries is it reminds me of the TV show. What's the TV show with Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer? If any, I think most people know what I'm talking about. It was a super popular TV show. And I noticed that I only watched maybe 1 or 2 or 3 episodes, but I just noticed that every time, okay, it was some nightmare dog that the dog owners couldn't take control over, and they were just at their wits' end. And I mean, it's this nightmare situation. And number one, Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, he can always come in and he gets the dog, excuse me, to be submissive like that. I mean, he gets the dog to submit to him. Like, I mean, it's like the dog's like in submission, like all of a sudden after this like crazy nightmare situation. And the majority of the episode is Cesar working with the dog owners because they're the ones who've created this problem. Yep. And so it just always makes me think of like, okay, a kid is like that. Okay, the parents need to do the kid. For us as design professionals, we're the professional and the client is along for the ride. So it's always our job to set the boundaries. So if something gets crazy, you have to look at like, well, where didn't I set the boundary? Because I guarantee there's some hole there.
Yep.
And so you don't want a crazy nightmare dog like Cesar Millan.
Yeah. And I hope no one gets a call on Christmas Eve with an irate client.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think,
but it's good to learn from us and each other. That's part of why we or creating this community, because that's what Andy and I learned. And when we entered the industry way back in like early 2000s, is we had the gift of a large enough company where we could all come together as a company and share all of our, it was like 10 or 15 people. So we were always sharing our experiences. So she and I, even though we were junior staff at that point, we were like learning from these people who were, you know, much older than us and had been doing it for like a really long time, because they were sharing, oh, this story and this happened, and well, this is how we're going to prevent that, and that's how she and I got to this type of way of being. Like, every project always has a budget, and every project we know what the fees are, and then we were able to have flat fees, which was a process to get to. But the reason for these things is because we want you guys to learn as a, like, we know that learning as a community is so much more powerful, and most of us are like working from home. You know, you might not be part of a big company, you might have a smallish company, and so we wanted this to feel, this is supposed to feel like this is your community. And that's why we share our fun stories. And we have our community on the website too. But we really want you to feel like you have a community that has your back, because we don't expect you to know how to do everything, but there's a place to learn what the pickles and pitfalls are, that we call it.
Yeah. And I think that so again, shamelessly, like, we have this other business, this coaching platform. And part of the podcast is definitely mentorship, but there's also, you know, a weekly coaching call that we offer. And then there's also a once a month coaching call. And then we've got one-on-one mentorship. So depending on what you need, I think there's a lot of support out there. And whether it's with us or someone else, I want everyone to feel like they don't have to do this alone. Like, this,
Yeah.
as you said before, this can be a really expensive business. And if you don't have business insurance, which you all should, errors and omissions, go get it. It's really helpful to avoid expensive mistakes when you are in community versus trying to figure it out on your own. Because, you know, we both did this. Like, we both worked for these really successful firms. We were great designers in those firms. We were highly valued, and we did a really good job. And at some point, I think we topped out ability to earn what we were worth and decided to move on. And what you don't know as a designer is how to run the business. Like, you run the business as a designer, but that's not a business. And so that's a part of a business.
That's only one of the 9 hats.
Yeah. Yeah.
As our one of our past episodes talks about, if you want to learn about what, oh, there's 9 hats. Yeah, there are 9 hats.
Yeah. So which
to
hat
put
are you
on in your
wearing?
business. And you might be wearing all 9 of them at once and not understanding why you're overwhelmed.
Yeah. So that's a boundary for yourself to create. So on
Well,
that
we hope we really gave you a lot of juicy reasons to love boundaries.
Yeah, I love boundaries. Do you love boundaries?
I do now. I have to be honest. I didn't know what they were as a younger version of myself. It was probably you know, the past 10 years of really understanding that I needed them. I don't think I knew what boundaries were when I was much younger.
Yeah, I would say, like, my 13 years of design growth, personal growth, have allowed me to understand boundaries, how to create them, which ones are the most important ones for me. And so this is a topic, I think, that's been a long time coming, and also incredibly important, because, again, I think that the setting of boundaries, the creating of expectations, really does create a safety container for you and the client. And it really does engender a lot of trust and allow you to move forward and get to that yes faster. So
Yeah.
all right, is that it?
More on that, yes, next time. We have another exciting episode coming out next week.
So many. There's so many things to talk about. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening and being part of our community. Speaking of community, please head over to our website and sign up for podcast alerts and blog posts. And if you're looking for more resources to up-level your business, create more time in your schedule, and improve your profits, we have a blueprint for your success that covers mindset, systems, business, teams, and tools. Think of us as your unaccredited university. Visit us at under-the-fringe.com and tune in next week for our next deep dive on creating more freedom and less struggle.